Because I completely
Absolutely.
forgot to ask you about that.
Not at all, not at all. So I'm now recording the session, and what I like to do, as you know, is for other classes as well. Just as soon as we finish this session, I'll go ahead and process this, and then send this to you, Dr. Smith, as a YouTube link, and then you can go ahead and put that into your class in Canvas. And then if anybody else needs to go back and rewatch that at any point, it'll be available, and you're more than welcome to do that as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
No worries. So as Dr. Smith indicated, I have been actually doing this type of work for a long time now, and I will tell you, I love visiting with the collection development class. I like working with all of the SLIM classes, either face-to-face if I get an opportunity, or this way through SLIM. But one of the reasons that I really enjoy this, once you get to this advanced level and you're taking these types of classes, is precisely as Dr. Smith indicated. Now we can really get into, I would say, the heart of the matter when it comes to librarianship. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about academic, public school, whatever. Collection development. Some things have changed, some things have stayed exactly the same. I would say what stayed exactly the same is trying to make sure that you are in touch with whatever your user community happens to be and whatever it is that they are wanting, regardless of format. The School of Library and Information Management is an excellent example of this. You all definitely are not unique in terms of being a cohort group and being distance education students. In fact, I often think that what will happen is with different ones, and I would say even here in Emporia, it's not at all unusual for our students, either that are even taking classes at the Emporia campus. It's not unusual for them to be distance education students as much as anything else, because they are just simply not going to be here. They're not here as far as Emporia is concerned. And Dr. Smith, you know how this is. We have students that may be residential in Emporia, but they may be working, they may have families, they may be very busy. The bottom line is we really cannot rely upon all students being able to get physically to William Allen White Library. So what I've had to do in the last few years is be very responsive to what our student population is, and SLIM is a great example of this. Dr. Smith had asked me if I could take you through some different vendors, looking at the way that we do acquisitions for regular books, ebooks, and so forth, and then also look at the vendors from the journals and the databases perspective. So that's what I'm going to do. But at any point, I want to make sure that if you have any questions, and Dr. Smith, I'm going to kind of rely on you for any cues or anything, if they look confused, or if anybody has any questions at any point, like that, there you go. You can act that out for me. I want to stop and then try to clear up anything. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing some of my screens with you. And I thought what I would do is actually take you through here first. We're going to go here. And I'm actually then going to click on this screen. Are you seeing a screen now that says Gobi by any chance?
No, we're seeing a Zoom screen saying sign in.
All righty, then let's go ahead and we're going to get rid of this. Let me go back over here. That's why I was asking what you were actually seeing. Okay, let's minimize this screen. Let's stop share. I'm going to do that share again. And I think this time you'll be able to see. Okay, are you seeing Gobi now? Gobi search results?
Hang on. Yes, we are. Thank you.
Awesome. Perfect. Good, good, good. I always like to stop and kind of pause, because sometimes I can start talking, then I realize that what I'm looking at the screen may not actually be what's actually being shared through Zoom. So I wanted to bring this up for you all. We actually deal with acquisitions of materials in a couple of different ways. So let's say, for example, that Dr. Smith emails me. And he says, you know, Cynthia, I really would appreciate it if you all could order such and such a book for the library. Generally, what will happen with SLIM faculty, because we are very cognizant of this, often the SLIM faculty will say, if there's any way you can get this book in an ebook, in an electronic book format, we would be most appreciative of that. Again, because We have people who are not actually physically on campus, and we need to see how we can make this material available to them in any way possible. Now, having said that, speaking of vendors, not all vendors are the same when it comes to electronic books, and we find this very much to be the case. Some vendors are very good about making something available through something called, and I'm going to scroll down here so you can see this a little bit better. I did a search on Gobi. Now, Gobi is actually an ordering system that we use through the library to acquire our materials, and it's actually through YBP, which used to be Yankee Book Publishers. I do not actually send orders directly to Gobi to actually be processed, though. We have an intermediary step. We have a business manager at our library, and she's actually the individual who would receive anything that I would basically put in like an order list or a wish list through Gobi. So I have a Gobi account. I'm signed in that right now. What Gobi enables me to do is kind of like searching on Amazon. Gobi allows me to search by title, by author, by ISBN. I can go ahead and create order lists. I can create wish lists of materials that faculty may want or that I think we need to order for the library. But more important, it will let me see in this day and age, and that's why I'm scrolling down here, Gobi is a way that we can actually keep track in the library of something called contracts that we have with different vendors. Now, some of you may be familiar with the fact that when you go to the library's webpage and you do a search in our discovery search for a book or for an ebook or for an article, we actually are using something called EBSCOhost. And EBSCO is going to become very important in just a second because EBSCO's kind of become the huge vendor of almost everything anymore, for better or worse. EBSCOhost is a vendor that will provide access not only to databases, such as databases like Library and Information Science Source. EBSCOhost, through our EBSCOhost EDS or Electronic Discovery Service, also allows us to have a contract on file. And the beauty of that contract is if I'm in Gobi and I'm searching for the title of this book, The Internet of Things, For Things and By Things, it looks like this particular one, this particular edition for the ebook is pending publication in 2019, although it's already been published in print. What I want you to do is look down here. So this is something that I have to look for on Gobi before I even send an order to our business manager. Over here, it looks like I have a supplier for this ebook, EBSCOhost. This is going to become pretty important because it looks like with EBSCOhost, I can get this book as an ebook for the library. I can purchase it with 1 concurrent user, 3 concurrent users, concurrent access of 325 uses, or an unlimited usage, so I'm not limited in terms of 1 user at a time or 1 access point at a time, for $158. Over here, notice it says library availability, contract on file. What that means is that we have a contract with our library with EBSCOhost for ebooks. And so, Dr. Smith, what that would mean is if you send a request to me for a book and you said you really wanted it to be available as an ebook, this would be my next step. I would go to Gobi. I would see, number 1, is this available as an ebook? Number 2, can we actually get it through our EBSCOhost ebook service? Because if we can, our contract is already on file. So we have a contract with EBSCOhost. We don't have to do any other negotiations or anything. I can send that request through. I actually, at this point, and this is what I have done from time to time, I would actually go back and I would visit with my library dean, Michelle Hammond. And what I would say is, it looks like Slim wants this book. They want it as an ebook. I can get this one for 1 user for $88, all the way up to an unlimited user for $158. And I will say that Dean Hammond has been very, very good and very generous about saying that we're going to go ahead and get ebooks with unlimited users whenever we possibly can. Sometimes the unlimited users are not available. Then we just go with as many as we possibly can, such as 3 users. And I did that very recently for a book that I ordered as an ebook through Sarah Sutton, for example. Now, this particular book is also available through an ebook vendor called ProQuest eBook Central. And it looks like some of the prices are the same, but you notice over here it says no contract on file. With this particular example that I pulled up, I'm good because I could just order this through EBSCOhost, probably as an unlimited user, contract on file, I'm good to go. If we have an ebook that's available through Gobi, but it's not available through EBSCOhost, let's say it was only available through ProQuest eBook Central, for example, that's when we would probably have to get, at this point in time, into a one-on-one agreement or a one-on-one negotiation with ProQuest to see if we could actually purchase that as an ebook and then what the rights would be. I know that we are looking at ProQuest right now to see if we can get a subsequent contract with ProQuest eBook Central, and that would be really good. But right now we've been pretty lucky with EBSCOhost. So questions so far about what I would look for in terms of an ebook and availability?
I have a question. Everyone's here shaking
Absolutely.
their heads. They have no questions at all, but I do. So
Okay.
88 bucks is for how long is that? Is that forever and a day? Is that as long as we have a contract on file with EBSCOhost? Is it 1 year? What's the story? What does 88 bucks buy us?
Yeah. What does purchase actually mean in the ebook world? Yeah. That is a very good question. In this case with EBSCOhost, the purchase option isn't really going to be a purchase as such. And it's a little bit different than, say, if any of you are Kindle users. I use Kindle all the time, so I'm always getting books, you know, and like buying them through Amazon and downloading them as a Kindle. In this particular instance, we would have to look and see if this particular book, like if I bought it as an unlimited user or one user or whatever, I would have to see if the contract for that specific ebook included perpetual access or not. And perpetual access is a whole different world in and of itself. That also relates to electronic journals. Right now, I don't really know. I'd have to dig down a little bit more with each specific book and see if that purchase includes perpetual access, or does it go away if for some reason we decided not to have a contract with EBSCOhost anymore. So a lot of it will also depend upon the publisher. It's because going back up here, and this is something we do want to keep in mind as well. Let me go here. Here we go. So back on this one, the vendor who is providing access to this book as an ebook still is EBSCOhost, but the publisher ultimately up here is CRC Press. So a lot of that access, whether it's permanent, whether I've actually bought it or if I am just sort of renting it, you know, for the duration of the contract, it would depend upon what the publisher has determined as well.
Oh, sorry, there's a question, Sarah.
Oh, perfect. Good.
Okay, so the question was, if a new edition is published, does your license automatically give you the new version, or
no?
She's shaking her head. So if you buy the original version, that's what you've bought, and even if you have perpetual access, you have perpetual access to the original edition. If 3 years later they publish a completely new and revised edition, you would have to buy that as a separate entity.
Absolutely, absolutely, right. Just as you would with a print book is a good parallel of that. Another good parallel, I think that's a great question to bring up. I'm going to switch to another one for just a second, and Dr. Smith will remember this from just this past summer. The library has a subscription. Well, I really shouldn't say a subscription. We have purchased access to an electronic encyclopedia that many of you may have used for your classes, which is the Encyclopedia of Library and Information Sciences. We purchased access to that for years and years and years, as the third edition of that encyclopedia, and that was the latest one for a long time. Well, Taylor and Francis actually bought the rights of that encyclopedia from CRC Press, which we see here as well, and they made it available. They upgraded it earlier this summer, actually back in the spring and early summer, as the fourth edition. But we had to turn around and actually purchase the access to the fourth edition all over again, even though we had already purchased access to the third edition. Other questions right now?
Yes, Sunny.
Yes.
So the question was, at what point do you deselect outdated or original editions? So if you did you cut access to the third edition since you now have the fourth edition? You don't get any money back for it, do you?
No, we do not. I am so glad this question came up. This encyclopedia has been a thorn in my side. And I say that rather jokingly and rather not, because this is what we found happened with the Encyclopedia of Library and Information Sciences. We wanted to upgrade to the fourth edition because we knew that it would have updated information, and so we chose to do that. In upgrading, because we basically said we were just going to upgrade and we were going to go ahead and subscribe to the fourth edition, we totally lost access to the third edition. And this is the kicker. This is something you have to remember when it comes to ebooks as opposed to actual print materials. And it doesn't happen with every single situation. This is more of an encyclopedia rather than a book. But in that particular instance, we totally lost access to the third edition. I contacted Taylor and Francis and I said, now we've been a customer for a long time. And we had a subscription going for probably about 4 or 5 years for the third edition of that encyclopedia. Is there any way that we can maintain access to that, given the fact that we are also subscribing to the fourth edition? Their answer to me at that time was, well, if you would like to pay, and I don't remember what the amount was, but if you would like to pay an additional amount, we will restore your access to the third edition. And we said, well, that's very interesting. We're going to have to think about that. We have not up until this point, but that's something that we might have to go back and take a look at, because I will tell you something else that happened with that encyclopedia. And this is something, again, we have to keep in mind with electronic resources. Electronic resources are kind of a moving target, as opposed to something that's a static print resource. Everything has its strengths and everything has its disadvantages. What we found with the fourth edition of the Encyclopedia of Library and Information Sciences was that there were some articles that were in the third edition that were dropped from the fourth edition. Vice versa, there were articles that were added and updated that were not in the third edition that were now in the fourth edition. There's no good way of finding that out unless somebody actually sat down and did a quite literal side-by-side comparison of the table of contents of both encyclopedias. Now, of course, if we were dealing with a population in Emporia, we might then say, well, then we could have the print edition of the third, basically the third edition of the encyclopedia. We could have that in print. We could also have the fourth edition in print. But that doesn't make any sense with our SLIM population because you all are not on campus. You need to have that electronic access. But it's just something that you really have to keep in mind, particularly in, I would say, the era that we live in right now with electronic collection development. There are lots of these questions that you have to ask as a librarian, and you have to ask these vendors. Vendors are not necessarily going to volunteer this type of information. I will also tell you that a lot of these questions will just come from your experience as you gain more and more experience in this world.
Yes, Michael. Sort of digital rights management are attached to these books? Are they printable?
So the question is, what kind of right management are attached to these ebooks? Are they printable? Are they downloadable? What's the story?
Oh, that is a marvelous question. I'm so glad that came up. My answer is it depends. It all depends upon the vendor, and much also depends upon the publisher, what the publisher has given the rights to and what the publisher has not given the rights to. This is what I have found with EBSCOhost ebooks. And in fact, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a second. Let's go back here. And I'm going to, I'll come back to you all and share a screen in just a second because I want to pull up something that will let you see a better example of this. So I'm going to search for something on my side, and then I'm going to share my screen again with you.
And at one point, Cynthia, I know that the #1 question all librarians were asked in academic libraries to do with ebooks was, how can I print this out?
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Is that still a question you're getting, or are people becoming happier with only being able to read on screen?
No, I would say that that's a question that we're still getting. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to log in here on my side, and I'll show you a really good example of that. I still field a lot of questions from students just within the library and outside the library building itself that want to print out an entire ebook or want to download an entire ebook, or at least be able to do chapters. Now what will happen is most vendors, and we're going to see an example of this in just a sec, most vendors will allow you to go ahead, perfect, this is exactly what I wanted here. Okay, I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to share my screen again with you. And I'm going to show you next what I'm talking about when I say that different vendors will let you do different things. Are you all now seeing a screen from our catalog that says online searching, a guide to finding quality information? Fantastic. Okay. I wanted to bring up this one. This was actually, I mentioned a few seconds ago that I had been working with Dr. Sutton, Sarah Sutton, on a specific book. This is the one that we were working with. This was actually a textbook for another class that she was teaching, and as good luck would have it, we actually already had it in our catalog. But I wound up working with her because we were getting those very questions from students in her class. Can I download the whole thing? Can I print out different pages? What can I do? When we go down here to this record, the record for the book, notice that it says EBSCOhost ebook collection. So that's what I was talking about when we were looking on that Gobi screen. Publisher permissions, here's where we go to. It says that you can print, email, or save 60 pages. Now, I believe that's 60 pages at a time. What I'm saying is sometimes people kind of find ways of working around some of these restrictions, but that is what they have actually set. But they do also have restricted copy-paste on here. When I was talking about that concurrent user level, this particular one, if I remember correctly, was one that we could only find with the 3 concurrent users. So when it says 3 copies available, that basically means that 3 people at a time or 3 students at a time could go in and actually then view the book. If we go here to PDF full text, we can see what happens. And you see it's still loading. And there's the book. Are you all seeing the front cover of the book? Okay. And this is where I can go into select and email pages. Number of pages available, 60. Or print pages. Number of pages available, 60. So it let me, in this particular instance, it would let me do the current page or the current page and the next, probably the next 59 pages. Like I said, though, people do find ways of actually working around this. So, technically speaking, theoretically speaking, could I print another 60 pages at a time? It might let me do this, but it also might kind of actually set a limit at that particular point and say, well, you've already done that, so you really can't do anymore. But I just wanted to spend just a second just showing you what that looks like from the searching screen. And this is a good example of what an EBSCOhost ebook would look like, particularly in the way that you can view it and also what you can do in terms of printing pages or emailing pages or saving pages.
Let me ask
And
you.
you can also say, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, let me ask you a question here. So you are signed in to ESU's library catalog, which is then accessing EBSCOhost.
Yes, I am signed in with my Buzzin username and password.
Who is actually monitoring those 60 pages? So is that happening in the Emporia end, or is that happening at the EBSCO end, according to your particular login?
This would be any type of monitoring, particularly on what I would be printing or saving or downloading, is happening at the EBSCOhost end.
Okay.
So it's not, yeah, it's not actually, and I don't know, there are cases that pop up, and they're rather interesting if you ever want to do any searching for them as well as students. There are cases that pop up of vendors who will every once in a while, I think JSTOR's done this, maybe Project Muse as well, but there are vendors who will actually flag what they seem to be an inordinate amount of activity that's taking place from a particular IP address, and that IP address might be something that's been proxied through a university such as Emporia State, and in that case they might come back to us and say, from this IP address, or we've got something pinged here, it looks like somebody's downloading a lot of ebooks, or somebody's trying to download a lot of articles, and there's something going on here. We've not had that happen to us, but I certainly have read about that and heard that happen at other libraries. So yes, that monitoring will come from the vendor's end.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. At this point, Dr. Smith, would you want me to move on and show you all some examples of different types of collection development decisions and what we look at in terms of usage statistics for databases and so forth?
Yeah, I think that would be useful.
Okay.
Yes, there's a lot of nodding going on in the hall, so
oh,
yes.
Good. And you're reflecting the nodding, so that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I wanted to pose that question is one of my major responsibilities at the library is actually assessment. And so I do a lot of assessment projects in a variety of aspects. And one part of my assessment responsibility is, from time to time, my dean may ask me to report something called usage statistics. And essentially what she may do is say, Cynthia, I want you to go in and I want you to show me how much a particular database is actually being used in an academic year, in a fiscal year, in a calendar year, in the last 3 months, something like that. And that's something that I actually really enjoy doing. So the way that works is that all different vendors, EBSCO, ProQuest, JSTOR, what have you, have administrative logins. So if I go in on an administrator side for a particular vendor, I can actually find what are called counter-compliant statistics. So if you all have ever heard of, or if you ever run across the idea of counter statistics, counter R4, or anything like that, counter is actually a standardized way for usage statistics to be pulled across vendors and across databases. So counter statistics can be things like the number of searches, the number of times a particular database has been searched in a range of a month or a week or days or a year. Another counter statistic can be full text views. So if I have a database that's in full text, I can go in and I can run a usage report, and that will show me the number of times that full text, like full text of articles, has actually been pulled from that particular database. Now here's the thing on usage statistics though, and this is something we do have to keep in mind. We can use usage statistics to help inform decision making when it comes to maintaining a subscription to a database or to an electronic journal, because we have a lot of electronic journal subscriptions and I can do the same thing with those. But that's only part of it. So let's say that I have a database and I do usage statistics for it, and it looks like that database just really hasn't been used very much. That gives me a data point, it gives me a metric, but to be responsible, I really need to go beyond that. Does that mean that people don't know that that database is even out there in the first place? Maybe we didn't do a very good job of promoting that database and we need to do more outreach. does it mean that that particular database is no longer the most appropriate one for a subject or for a discipline in the case of an academic library? And if that's the case, then I need to go visit with the faculty and I need to say, you know, we have this database in your field, but it's not really being used that much. Are you all aware of it? Is it no longer being used? Is there one out there that's maybe more appropriate for your research and for your curriculum needs? So what I decided that would be kind of fun to do, and I'm going to click on a tab here and make sure that you all see that as well. Are you all now seeing a screen that says EBSCO admin?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm just waiting for the Kentucky bourbon one to show up.
Oh, that's you see that one? That's
Yeah.
my Kentucky bourbon cake.
Oh, okay.
I'm so sorry to disappoint you. That one looked really interesting.
I'll look forward to that on my return to Emporia.
Maybe I'll bring that to our Christmas party. How's that? So with EBSCO admin, I'm going to go back over here to reports and statistics and let that do its thing. So what I've already done is, this is actually the administrative side of EBSCOhost that I was mentioning earlier. Well, I've gone in and I've logged in with my administrative password and login. And when I just mentioned counter R4 reports, this is exactly what I meant. There are standard usage reports and there are also counter reports. We're going to go back and click on counter again. And this is what I wanted to show you. So with the counter reports, as I said, counter is basically standardized across databases. So if I'm in a different vendor, I should get the same types of counter reports, which basically it makes it very easy to compare apples to apples. I'm comparing the same type of data no matter what. So in this particular instance, these are all the different types of reports that I could get with counter reports. So if I wanted database report 1, database report 1 is going to give me total searches, result clicks, and record views by month and database. This basically means that if I were to run this report, I would get the total number of searches, basically how many times databases that are EBSCOhost databases have been searched. And we have a lot of EBSCOhost databases. I'm going to show you that in just a second as well. Result clicks, how many times, if somebody clicked, did they actually get a result? And finally, record views. Now, record views are not quite the same as full text because some of these databases that are EBSCOhost databases may not actually have the full text. So in this case, a record view could actually be the view of a bibliographic record. So again, you have to keep in mind that this is not everything you want to consider whenever you are making decisions on databases, but at least it will give you a little bit more of, I would say a little bit more data, so you can make a little bit more of a data-driven decision. And down here, when I was saying that I could limit my search, I could say that perhaps I wanted this report to be from the last fiscal year, the last complete fiscal year. I could do July 2017 to June of 2018, or I can, in this particular instance, since we just started November, we don't have our complete results yet for October, so it looks like right now I could get July through September of 2018 for this school year so far, for this academic year, and see what would happen. I'm not actually going to run this report because I actually have another report up here that I'm going to show you. So I'm going to go ahead and share another screen with you.
Let me ask you a question. Since we're already, what are we, November 3rd?
Yeah.
How long does it take for that statistical data to be compiled? I assume EBSCO has to run something on their end to make that available to you.
Right. Probably, I would say within this next week, if I were to log back in again, I could see the rest for October. And that actually also depends upon from one vendor to the next, because there are some vendors of databases that will give you almost real time. So I can go in with some vendors and get basically up-to-date statistics, like from up to like a couple of days previously. So it all kind of depends. I think EBSCO, they just have a lot to process. But like I said, probably if I went back in, maybe by about Wednesday or Thursday of the next week, I would say that they would have everything completed as far as October is concerned. And then I could go in and include that. So are you all seeing a spreadsheet now?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so this is actually kind of an edited spreadsheet that I prepared for you all. This was actually the report that I downloaded from that previous screen, and I downloaded it from July of 2017 to June 30th, 2018. My original spreadsheet that I downloaded was a long list of this information from all of our EBSCO host databases. So it was a pretty long list. What I did was edit this. And when I edited it, what I did was basically just condense it to the library and information science databases that we have, because I thought that you all might want to see that your searches count. So we like the fact that you're using the databases. So one that you may be using, and I hope you're using, is Library and Information Science Source. And you can see that when we start looking at the regular searches, this column, searches federated and automated, that's kind of an interesting one. That actually refers to searches that you may have done through that discovery service, basically the EDS service. When you're searching directly through the library's webpage, that's almost like a federated search because it's bringing in a lot of different databases plus the library catalog. So those searches are actually counted as well. So in other words, it looks like we're getting a lot of hits and a lot of searches for this database, for information from this database, from the EDS, from the EBSCO Host Discovery Service. So that's a good thing. That's what we want to know. But this is the kind of stuff that I look for. So again, if my dean wants me to analyze these statistics, I can make charts, I can make graphs, and I do that a lot as well. But this is what is so interesting. So if we start looking at Library and Information Science Source, it looks like, if we're just looking at the regular searches, July wasn't, it was busy, it was okay. August picked up a little bit. September, we started to peak a little bit. And we see the same thing happening. You see that throughout the course of the semester. So that makes it relatively easy for me to say, aha, it looks like in February of 2018, there must have been a lot of stuff going on with SLIM, probably a lot of assignments, a lot of searching, a lot of research, because you can see how this peaks. So if I turn this information into a graph or to a chart, that makes it really easy visually for me to show that to my dean. And then at the same time, it makes it very easy for my dean to say, well, obviously we're going to keep Library and Information Science Source. That's a database that we subscribe to. We would keep it anyway because we're supporting SLIM, but this is additional evidence that I can give to my dean to say, you know what, this is really being used. So I thought you all might enjoy seeing something like that and seeing that what I can pull from the administrative end and how that can help us make decisions accordingly.
Can you just pause there for a minute, please, Cynthia?
Yes.
So a regular search is someone would actually select Library and Information Science database. So they're
Yes.
going directly into that database and performing
Yes.
the search.
Yes.
What's fascinating to me is to see how that flips. You see, look at July, many more searches were performed directly into the database than through the discovery link.
Yes.
But then as you start moving into the semester, it flips, and many more searches are happening in the discovery link than are directly in the database. That's totally fascinating. Why is that?
I can tell you exactly why that happened in July of 2017.
Okay,
And
good.
Because in July of 2017, we would have been doing a transition, and I would go back, I would have to go back and take a look. But I am thinking right now that in July of 2017, we had not quite yet put Library and Information Science Source as a database to be searched in the Discovery Service. I think that happened kind of in the middle of July. So that's why you see that. Yeah. So this is what I mean, you know, when I talk about data, and Dr. Smith, you know about this far better than me, data is only part of that decision that we make. We still have to go back and figure out anecdotally, qualitatively, what other things might have been going on that would have affected those results in a positive way or in a negative way. Yeah, I saw that result too, and I thought, I remember that. That's why. Actually, I scooted down to the bottom here to the end on June of 2018. Notice the same thing here in June of 2018. Okay, there's a reason for that one. So the reason for that difference in June of 2018, as opposed to some of these other things that we see going on, like from August through May of 2018. In June of 2018, we were having a migration from our old library system, our old integrated library system, to a new one, which now we're using LI Sierra. And prior to that time, we were using EBSCO, not EBSCO, sorry, we were using WorldCat WMS, World Share Management Service. Well, what happened in June and also in July of 2018, we found that the EBSCO host EDS did not play well with LI Sierra. And so we had to actually turn that off for a while. So what you're seeing in June of 2018 is a situation in which we were only operating, we were not operating with a federated search. We were only operating with a library catalog. So then the only way that students had to get access to everything in library and information science source was up here to do the regular searches directly through the database. We got that fixed, and now everything is coming through EBSCOhost EDS again, but that's another example of kind of needing that background information to figure out what was going on.
But I think the important thing here is there are two things that look similar, and they have a similar causality, but not the same reason.
No,
so,
no, not at all.
But this is also why it's very important that if you are making data decisions, that you don't only use one data source, and that you don't, now here's the other thing, if you looked at the data in July 2017, those usage statistics are pretty minimal. So you would say, is it really worthwhile? Those rotten library students aren't looking for anything. Is it really worth our while?
Right.
But then look at October. Suddenly we have 20,000 searches going on in October. So it's just so important that we look. And here's the other thing, 1 year might also not be sufficient, because you also don't know what is actually going on in SLIM. Right. Are there times where SLIM has one cohort? So for example, this January, the Overland Park cohort that started was not quite as big as it has been in the previous 7 or 8 years. So it was usually 50 students split into two 25-student cohorts. And this current January, it was 35 students who were going as one cohort, which the faculty were not happy about, but that's a different story. But suddenly you're saying, well, there's a reduction in student numbers. Next fall, when we add a new cohort in Las Vegas, there will be an extra 25 students using the service, and so you'll see something else. If you don't know the context in which these numbers are coming,
yes,
it's not because suddenly all of you people are getting gung-ho to get into the databases. There's a whole bunch of extra people getting into the databases. So you must have a context for this, which is why I'm not the big fan of letting Follett or anyone else run your numbers and throw out everything that, quote, hasn't circulated or hasn't done something else.
Right.
Sorry.
Right. No, I think that is a very, very appropriate way to put it, because these will only tell one side of the story, and there's so much more that we do have to take into consideration. We might have a semester in which SLIM did not teach a specific course or specific courses that might have required the use of something such as the Encyclopedia of Library and Information Sciences. The next semester, we have a lot of sections of a course that are requiring that. So lots of variations there. So yes, Something else, and you mentioned that just a few seconds ago, Dr. Smith. Often what I will do is I will run different comparisons of different years, and then I will graph them together for my dean as well, so that we're looking for any anomalies, but we're also looking for trends. So if we can see by and large that something really is being used over the course of 2 years, 3 years, and so forth, we feel pretty safe in using that to help make decisions. If we're seeing that something else is not really being used again over the course of 2 or 3 or 4 years, okay, again, we're seeing a little bit of a trend there. But yeah, there's so much more that you have to take into consideration. Dr. Smith, what have I not covered so far that you would like for me to highlight?
I know there's something else I would like. Is there something from the floor that since we have this wonderful librarian right here, captive, that you're dying to know? And I'll say my bit first while they're all looking puzzled.
Okay.
I would like you to talk a little bit about journals and the journal crisis.
Very happy to do that. Well, I guess I shouldn't say happy. I can talk about it. How's that? The journal crisis. We are finding that there's a lot going on both in print journals and also electronic journals. So I'm going to focus a little bit on both. I mentioned that EBSCO tends to be kind of the publisher slash vendor of just about everything these days. So for example, the vast majority of our databases are now EBSCO host databases, except for some that are rather unique in nature. In a similar way, the majority of our periodical subscriptions, both print and electronic, are through EBSCO, although we do have some through some other vendors as well. In terms of the journal's crisis, I think what we're seeing as much as anything else is the publisher Elsevier.
Excuse me 1 second. Does everybody actually know what I'm talking to when I refer to the journal's crisis? I'm seeing some nods, but some people no. So can you start off by telling us what the journal's crisis is, please?
Okay. So this would be my interpretation of the journal's crisis, and I would also call it almost predatory journals. This is what we see, and I am going to go back to Elsevier because that's probably one of the biggest ones that we're dealing with right now. So Elsevier is a very, very well-known journal publisher. Scientific journals, a lot of library and information science journals are also published by Elsevier. Elsevier publishes both print and electronic. Electronic journals are actually through a service called Science Direct, but they're still through Elsevier. They are horrendously expensive, tremendously expensive. What happens is that libraries can get sort of caught in a situation in which you spend tens of thousands, and depending upon the size of your library, hundreds of thousands of dollars on electronic journal subscriptions from a publisher such as Elsevier Science Direct, because you've got to provide that access. At the same time, faculty feel perhaps a certain amount of pressure to publish in these journals because of the impact factor, because of cited references, because they are seen to be the peer-reviewed, the primary ones in that field. They're actually publishing for free, and then libraries are turning around and paying an enormous amount of money to provide access to those journals in turn that the faculty have already published in. I see that as a journal's crisis. And the reason I see it is it's kind of darned if you do and darned if you don't. Science Direct / Elsevier can negotiate, and they do indeed negotiate separately with different libraries. We really haven't talked about pricing, but this actually goes into the journal's crisis. One library can pay a particular subscription fee for a database, and another library can pay a totally different subscription fee for that database, because a lot of it is dependent upon full-time enrollment, FTE, other factors. The same thing can happen with journals packages, such as our Science Direct package. Going back to usage statistics, I run a lot of usage statistics for our Science Direct package, and I think we have maybe about 15 journals now that are through Elsevier Science Direct. Again, horrendously expensive, but if we don't provide access to those journals, direct access for our faculty and for our students, Then we are dependent upon document delivery, we're dependent upon interlibrary loan, and you're not getting that immediate access. So, but the pricing just keeps going up and up and up, and where does it stop?
You have figures on the percentage increases we've been paying for journals recently.
I am actually, I apologize, I'm not at liberty to release exact figures. I wish that I were, but I can safely say that the percentages have been going up every single year.
And by much more than the rate of inflation?
Yes.
Or the cost of, yes. Okay.
Yes, I can very safely say that. Yeah, and certainly outstripping our budget that we have for periodicals and for data.
Thank you. So I have a question, Michael.
Outside of SLIM, do you make a point to how aware is faculty of the crisis? At least on your campus, how aware are they?
How aware is the ESU faculty of the journal's crisis, of journals pricing and things?
Good question. I'd say the majority of our faculty across campus are very aware. One reason for that is Dr. Smith just mentioned that in addition to being the liaison for SLIM, I'm also the librarian liaison for psychology and counselor education. And each of us librarians is a liaison for one or more academic departments. We have all made a point of going to faculty meetings, emailing our faculty, and letting them know exactly what I've been telling you all right now. In fact, every year, we actually do a very extensive review of our print and electronic periodical subscriptions. And that's where my assessment part comes into play. I provide these same types of usage statistics for the electronic journals. And I also do for our library faculty an estimate of the CPU, the cost per use. So in that case, that would be the cost per full text access for our electronic periodicals. But here's the kicker. It wouldn't be right of us and it wouldn't be appropriate to say, well, here's a journal and it looks like it's costing $50 CPU, $50 for each full text access. If that journal is required for accreditation, for original accreditation, or for a discipline-specific accreditation. If it's being used, and even if it looks like it hasn't been used that often, it might be being used a lot, but it's also a very expensive subscription, so we have to balance everything else into place. So what we do in that particular instance is we look for things such as, if it's an electronic periodical subscription, is it also available full text or in one or more databases? And if it is available full text in one or more databases, is there something called an embargo? And this is something you all may or may not be familiar with. If a journal is available full text in a database, it may be current. It may be up to the current issue. The publisher, though, may have imposed what is called an embargo. An embargo simply means that the electronic full text rights to that journal have been delayed by the publisher in that specific database. So if you ever run across situations in which you're searching in a database like Library and Information Science Source, and you find the full text of a journal, but it looks like it's not available as of 12 months ago, a year ago, or 18 months ago, that's an embargo. And every publisher can impose that. So we might say, okay, this journal is available in this database, but there's an embargo of 12 months or 18 months. Is that going to make a difference if we canceled the subsequent electronic periodical subscription and then took away that current access, basically those current issues? Or can people get by with that embargo and then rely upon something like interlibrary loan or document delivery? It's all a tremendous balancing act, and unfortunately, it's not going to get any better.
At what point, is there a figure at what point you would look and say it is much more cost effective for us to ILL something or do document delivery than the particular CPU we're seeing for this database?
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us a figure on that?
We do, and that is something that's based on what has been kind of in published literature and so forth. A very, very rough figure would be $25 to $30 per article. So if something is costing like $25 or $30 for the cost per use, the CPU, that's going to be kind of on the borderline, and we're going to look at other factors. We are actually looking at a service that's called Rapid ILL. And with Rapid ILL, that's actually almost the same day turnaround for interlibrary loan or document delivery of the full text of that article. The cost for Rapid ILL is also maybe about $25 to $30 per article. So it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other, and it's all kind of a moving target. But we generally will do about $25 to $30, realizing that in some instances, that might be a little bit too high. In other instances, that might be a little bit too low. We look for patterns, though, again, patterns or trends. So we had an electronic periodical for 2 or 3 years that was about $25 or $30 per full text. That might be a possibility for cancellation, again, based upon other factors.
How many journal titles or databases have we unsubscribed to in the last few years? Again, just a ballpark figure.
You know, honestly, not all that many. I'm not really at liberty to say a particular amount or anything like that. We have, well, I'll put it to you all this way. So in fiscal year FY 2016, we canceled a few print and electronic periodicals. And then in FY 17, we did the same thing. In FY 18, we didn't really cancel as much as we moved some print and electronic periodical subscriptions from EBSCO to another vendor. It was WT Cox. And the reason we did that was that we found that WT Cox was actually giving us a better deal. So at that particular point, we said, you know, do you try to keep canceling, or do you try to look for better deals elsewhere? So that's kind of where we are right now.
So that also says, though, that there are databases that aren't only available through one outlet.
You got it. That's exactly
although
it.
when you were showing us the ebook listing in Gobi, the two ebooks you showed us were actually the same price from two different outlets. But in this, you've actually switched some databases from one provider to another.
Periodicals we have.
Periodicals from one supplier to another supplier because of the difference in pricing.
Yes. Yeah,
Monica.
Because with WT Cox, with the periodicals, they were actually giving us a little bit of a better deal for the same type of access. And so we thought, well, let's try this, you know, again, maintain our usage statistics for another year and just kind of see what happens. But Dr. Smith, you also mentioned databases. We actually have moved databases from one vendor to another as well because of cost. Yeah, we have. Right. For example, the PsycInfo database, which is used by a number of disciplines, we had that one through ProQuest for a number of years. And a couple of years ago, we moved that one from ProQuest to EBSCOhost, interestingly enough, because we were able to get a better deal on that.
Right. There was a question from Amanda.
This is happening with publishers have a monopoly
So the question from someone who is not as familiar with the journals is, this is happening because publishers have a monopoly and they're essentially holding libraries hostage. And I think that actually, yes, one of the biggest evidences of this, and it really started, was it 4 or 5 years ago in the state of California, and it was Nature journals, so science journals published by Nature.
Yes.
Targeted the state of California, which of course is one of the largest, it's an entire state university system, so one system, targeted them with an enormous increase in the cost of their journals. They did not target anybody else. So the rest of the United States stayed at the same price, but California had a huge bump. The state of California libraries tried to get their faculty to fight back by refusing to publish in Nature journals and refusing to edit for them. Here's the deal. The university pays faculty salaries. The faculty write articles, do research, write articles. The faculty also serve as peer reviewers. The faculty also serve as editors. All of that work is unpaid for by the publisher. The faculty submit for publication after it's been through peer review and editing. A lot of the science journals then charge faculty a fee to publish. So the university has paid faculty salaries to research, to write, to publish, to review, to edit the journal. Now the faculty member is having to pay money to have that article published, and then the university is told it has to spend even more money to buy the rights to share that work that was all created at the university expense back to the university. It really, especially in these days when we are providing essentially camera ready, it's not even almost camera ready, but the publishers are providing almost no editorial services or any other kind of services. Often now they're not even printing it. They're not printing it, they're not warehousing it, they're not distributing it. All of that is electronic. What is the value, really, to the academic community of those publishers? But the point was, promotion and tenure policies decreed that Nature journals were tier 1 journals, and you had to have published in a certain number of articles in tier 1 journals in order to get promotion or tenure. And the faculty would not look at changing their P&T policies, and therefore the libraries had no leverage. And so California ended up paying an enormous increase for those journals, and lo and behold, the next year, was it Texas the following year?
I believe it was, with that similar situation. And the way you articulated that Dr. Smith, is just very much on point. We've not mentioned the concept of open access journals, or OERs, open educational resources yet. But that's something else that sort of comes into play. With an open access journal, you're not paying for subscriptions, you're not paying to publish in that journal, but as you were saying, with promotion and tenure policies, with retention policies, annual evaluations, are open access journals actually counted as quote unquote valid? Are they quoted as basically, are they considered to be peer reviewed in the same sense that these other journals are? Sometimes yes, and sometimes no, and sometimes that can be a very hard fight.
I'll make one comment and then we have a question here.
Okay.
The SLIM faculty, we are actually looking at our P&T, promotion and tenure document at the moment, and one of the questions I have brought up, and Dr. Sutton's also very concerned about it, is, does our policy specifically approve publishing in open access peer-reviewed journals as a valid method of, and I'm here saying we're the library scientists. If we do not have this in our P&T document, why would we expect anybody else to have it in theirs? So we need to be leading with this and saying, there's, I'm sorry, it's the same people who are doing the peer review for this journal that's open access and this journal that's paid. Why would we not do that? Sunny, you had a question. Oh, you answered it. Okay.
Okay.
Well, and a lot of people do. Part of the difficulty is if you still have to publish in a tier 1, tier 2 journal, there's very often an embargo. So although you can put it in your online repository, it's maybe embargoed for a year. A lot of research coming out of that is government funded from National Institutes of Health, there are requirements that it has to be published, that the information has to be provided for free. But again, people aren't necessarily getting credit, so you'll end up with sort of faking things so that the information is published first in a paid-for journal before it is provided free to the taxpayers who paid for it. It's really, it's insidious is what this is. But it's very interesting that the people who are paying for the production of this knowledge are being barred from disseminating it.
Mhm. And very frustrating.
Okay, right. He now has another question. Yes. Great question. So the question was, this doesn't seem as if it can be very sustainable if we keep getting higher and higher increases. How long do you think it can go on, and what will happen?
Well,
Looking into your crystal ball.
because I have the answers for everything. I sometimes wonder if it's not going to have to be smaller universities like ESU who will have to lead the way, like you were just talking about, Dr. Smith, on what SLIM is looking at. That's very interesting because we're in the library, we're currently reviewing our faculty recognition document, our promotion to tenure policy as well. And we're having those same discussions about open access journals. We need to consider those valid if they are indeed peer reviewed, because otherwise, you know, what are we doing and what are we saying? I think maybe smaller universities that perhaps have a little bit more of a teaching emphasis and less upon a research emphasis may ironically have to lead the way with that. And I think as far as libraries are concerned, and basically academic librarians, I know that our dean does a ton of negotiations with vendors. And something I really do appreciate about Michelle is that she really does push back. In fact, she's doing that right now, ironically, with Science Direct. Our contract is up for negotiations right now with our Science Direct periodicals, and she's just really saying, this is unacceptable, you know? We realize that we need these particular periodicals, but what you're asking for is just absolutely unacceptable for a university of our nature. I don't think there are any real big solutions, but I do think we have to keep pushing back. I also think in terms of open educational resources in general, OERs with textbooks and so forth, I think maybe that's an area that our university is starting to explore a little bit more. And again, I think perhaps smaller ones to show that, yes, those can indeed be quality, peer-reviewed, reliable, certainly scholarly in nature. And the bottom line is, you know, we want to disseminate this information for a larger purpose, not to make money. So I think we just kind of have to keep pushing back.
Okay. Yes, Monica, and then I'll get to Sarah. No, Monica, on you.
If how do we know if they're peer reviewed or if we're looking at open access articles online? How do we know if that?
Okay, so the question was, how do we know if we're looking at open access resources, if they're peer reviewed or if they're okay or what?
Mm-hmm.
Simple answer is it usually will tell you.
Yes.
In the same way that a journal will tell you if you look inside. How do you look at the inside front page of electronic journals? I guess there will be a publications page somewhere available for a journal.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or go to the publisher's website and look for anything on guidelines for authors or guidelines for submission.
So in the same way that all paid for journals will include something that tells you that it is peer reviewed, an online journal would also have that. An open access journal would also have that.
Yes, that is true. That is true.
Who hosts the CULS proceedings, Cynthia? Do we host it?
That's actually hosted at Kansas State University through, it's basically through their open access publisher called New Prairie Press. And I'm very familiar with that because I was actually the first editor of those proceedings. So.
And those were peer reviewed, yes?
Yes. They are more, I would say they are peer reviewed / blind reviewed. I would put the proceedings kind of, they are peer reviewed. It's not really going to be the same as like an Elsevier journal or something like that. But we've always had a panel of reviewers. And I know that when I was reviewing them, at least, and then when I was the editor, we did more of a blind review process. And we had, at that time, when we first started out, we had 3 reviewers. And then we all were able to share our comments electronically through the New Prairie Press system, and then send those comments, and then any requests for resubmission back to basically back to the authors. But yeah,
Okay.
it's at Kansas State University.
Yep, yep. Okay, thanks. And Sarah, you had a question?
And then when I did it for him, I just found that he needs to send it back. Is that on the or
So, no, so you're saying, sorry, say that again. You have a faculty member, and so when he publishes, right, he gets you, and you don't, when he publishes and it's embargoed under the database you subscribe to, he has you ILL it. Yeah, that actually has the physical copy, and then he disseminates it to his class. Is that on the up and up? My question is, why is he not simply distributing to his class the original? I understand, but he is the author.
Mm-hmm.
Why can he not share that in his class? Well, I don't and Cynthia, jump in here at any
Absolutely.
moment, but that just seems so. No, so that's kind of bizarre. So you're ILLing something to distribute to your students isn't kosher, and then the fact that you're the author of it seems bizarre.
Right.
If you're the author of it, you can put a quote, you can distribute a pre-publication version to your students. So if you want your students to have the content,
Yes.
if necessary, change one word. Well, no, that's the part that is not correct. Because then he's, oh, so Cynthia,
Yes.
what should my students say to this faculty member who wants her to ILL an article from a print journal, which he
Right.
then redistributes to his class?
I would probably say no at that point because I know what's going on. Now, of course, somebody can do an interlibrary loan for an article, and if we don't know what they're doing with it, we don't know what they're doing with it. That's a really, really sticky situation. I wouldn't be comfortable with that. That might be even something you'd have to throw to, if you have like a university lawyer or a general counsel, maybe visit with them.
A copyright officer, yep.
Yeah. Anybody who might be in charge of copyright, I'd have a visit with them.
Well, but even if you're, well, but the point is, if somebody holds the title of copyright officer and you're not comfortable with that, you refer that to the copyright officer. If they then choose to allow something that is completely illegal, that's going to come back to them. You're protected because you have referred that to the person who's legal, whom your boss has said has the legal responsibility for advising on that. That's what I would, in my how to preserve my job, that's what I would do. It is not your job to usurp the copyright officer. And if someone has chosen to appoint someone as a copyright officer who has no clue about copyright, that's their lookout, but that is not your. Well, but some of this, yes, but it's not that you're trying to be obstructive. You're saying there is someone who specifically is authorized to deal with this. It is this person here, I'm referring it there because I do not think this is a valid use. I think this is an illegal use. What is your, well, here we are, we're in 855. what is your library policy on copyright? And if someone's told you, well, but if someone's told you, I want you to ILL this for the express purpose of me to redistribute it, that is a clear violation of copyright. And if your policy doesn't say a thing, does the university not have any policy about copyright? But does it say you can't do illegal things? Well, but I guess at that point, the other thing I would do is my mother did this for years. She was very good at it. She just acted innocent and she said, I don't understand this. Can you help me with this, please? And she would send it to the university council and say, this seems kind of strange to me. I don't understand it. Can you help? She knew very well exactly. My mother never asked that question without knowing exactly what the answer was. But rather than having a fight about it, where she was pitting herself against whoever the other person was, she just offered it up as, I have a question. And then suddenly that becomes the council's problem. And they will be the ones who come in and say, you absolutely can't do that. And then it's not you at all. I'm sorry, I didn't understand this. That's what the university council is there for, to answer these legal questions. So, oh, sure. Or just ask Cynthia. But no, folks, in the same, that's the whole purpose of policy, is so that you are not put in these kinds of positions. And if you have rotten policy or no policy, you get into exactly these situations where you don't have a leg to stand on, because you don't have a proper policy in your library that says we do not do illegal things. That's what your copyright policy should say. We're not going to violate copyright. We're not going to help you violate copyright either. That's the policy. If you don't understand that that's your policy and you don't understand that's the purpose of your policy, that's fine. Wait until the journal people start suing you. Not that I have any strong opinions. Yes. So the question was, if somebody is publishing something in Canvas, how is the library tracking that use? And the easy answer to that is the library isn't, because the library has no control over it.
It depends. This is what we strongly, strongly encourage faculty to do. So if you have a reading list for a SLIM course from a faculty member, and I do this a lot, I will happily work with each of the SLIM faculty members to see if basically first to see if the full text of those articles are available in our different databases. And if they are, we can do one of two things. Sometimes the faculty member will just provide a bibliography, and then the students will go out and then search for those articles full text in the different databases, which we really like because then it helps the usage statistics. The other thing that we can do is in different databases, there's something called a permalink. And in fact, if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen again. Let me go back over here, and you're going to see my screen again in just a second. Here we go. Okay. Are you seeing that online searching screen again from the catalog?
Yes.
Okay. Do you see this link up here that says permalink?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If I click on permalink, basically what that will do is, and it may not do that as well on this particular display. Sorry about that. Let me do that again. Basically, a permalink will actually come up, and it actually should pop up, but a permalink is available for really any type of full text article in a database. And if I can send a permalink, or the SLIM faculty member can just go ahead and generate a permalink, they can copy and paste that into their Canvas courses. The permalink then is actually a permanent link to that full text, And the great thing about a permalink is it bypasses, it already has that proxy access. So the permalink means that it doesn't matter if you are on campus or off campus, you can click on that permalink and get to the full text of that article, and it still counts for our usage statistics. Now, those are the two answers if that article is available, or if that book is available electronically in one or more of our databases. Where we start running into some questions will be when the article in question is too old to appear in a database. So maybe it was only in a print journal from the 1980s, for example. If we own the journal in our library, it will fall under fair use to scan a copy of that particular article and put that into the Canvas course because it is owned by our library in print. And it's also protected, basically it's password protected because you have to log in in order to get to that through your Canvas course. Now, I'm going to tell you though, that's kind of skirting a little bit in terms of copyright. It's providing access. Ideally, the best case scenario would be to request the copyright permission through the Copyright Clearance Center. And that's something that I will tell you that we are working on as far as our library is concerned. Because quite frankly, we're not getting a lot of questions on that nowadays because so many of the articles that people want to use are available electronically through our databases, and we're okay there. But we're kind of looking at that because you can skirt the boundaries of copyright so easily without even meaning to. But yes, in terms of a permalink, I think that's an ideal solution if it is available.
You'll notice that usually if something is freely available in the databases, I will tell you to go find it in the databases.
Yes.
If something is not available or is a paper copy, or is something else, like quite often I will do something from a book. Right. Where it's a little part of something. Yeah, I could make everybody go out and try and download it yourself or go to your own library and look at it. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say, no, I'm doing this. It's a limited part of something. I'm nowhere close to a whole, or it might be a whole chapter, but it's a whole chapter out of 26 chapters. I'm less than 10%. I'm this. Looking at the fair use, and I will make that available. Yeah, so I think we try to do things, I certainly try to do things that are reasonable. Other things I do, quite honestly, sometimes I've had people say, well, I ordered my book 6 weeks ago and the publishers tell me that it's going to be another 2 weeks before it comes. Right. In that case, for almost all my texts, I have the first couple of chapters that I have scanned in the past. And I know this person, now I'm not going to keep doing that the whole semester, right? But if I know you've ordered the book, you've given the people the money, I'm not depriving anybody of their just rights if I allow you to do something. We've also, I know poor Sheila O'Hare, when the latest version of Bob Smith reference book came out after being promised for 7 or 8 years, and she was assured it would be published in December, so she programmed it for her students. We got to January and it wasn't available. She actually contacted the publisher, Libraries Unlimited, and they gave her an electronic copy and said, please give this to everybody. Okay. Yeah. And we understand they've all ordered copies and that's fine, but they gave her the first 6, 7, or 8 chapters electronically to give to all her students because that was their fault. That wasn't the students' fault. Nobody was trying to get away with anything. So I think we try to do things that are reasonable. But that's not, the whole point is your professor could easily provide that content without any copyright quibbling at all by simply providing a pre-publication version. Very often that's what's in Google Scholar. If you go to Google Scholar, yes, you find versions of, and the versions are one word different from the final paper because people are using that as a way to get around it. Right. If it's the content that's important, your professor can give it to the students with no question. He is the author, but this ILL it from a print journal so I can then redistribute it. I mean, it's crazy. As well as being, we think, not kosher according to copyright.
Yeah.
Was that helpful, Sarah? Okay. We are past the time that I promised Cynthia we would finish, I think.
Oh. This has been so interesting.
But are there any other questions that are burning you up at the moment about electronic resources? Oh, I think the one thing I wanted to comment on, Cynthia, was we're always led to believe digital, it's so easy. None of this, silly book nonsense. You don't have to process it before you get on the shelf. Access, whoop-de-doo. But just listening to Cynthia talk about how you have to look at things, how you have to look and see, could I get this exact same resource more cheaply from a different vendor? So then do I have to change the source of this? And constantly be looking, and then Cynthia's not doing the negotiation. Michelle Hammond, the Dean of the Libraries, is doing the actual vendor negotiations, and at the moment saying, I can't afford that, I can't afford that, I can't afford that. And it's a cat and mouse game, essentially, where there will come a point where Michelle either has to say, yes, I'm going to give you the money you asked for, or she's going to say, that's fine, as of December 15th, we won't have access to Science Direct.
Right.
And wait to see
when that would, I was just going to say, Dr. Smith, and if and when that would happen with a periodical package or with a database, then I know that Michelle as the dean, and then the rest of us as library faculty would take that responsibility to go back to the faculty who are going to be most directly affected and say, this is where we are right now. But how can we help you with alternative ways of getting the information that you need and the information that your students need? So that's where we have to come into play as well. That we're not just saying, well, too bad we don't have that anymore. We're saying, this was a hard decision. This is why we had to make it, but how can we help you?
The other thing that we haven't quite said is, but the minute I think we stop some of these subscriptions, or maybe not the minute, but when we stop subscriptions to certain things, we lose access to back issues.
Right,
so that even if we said we don't want to subscribe to your journals from this point forward, we would lose the access from this point backwards as well. So the whole electronic thing is a whole different world from the world of paper.
It is indeed.
If you used to subscribe to a journal and you decide to discontinue it, you still had all the issues that you'd previously paid for. But now you are buying access. And it's access to everything. It's not access to things going forward, it's access to everything. So if you stop paying the money, you lose access to everything.
Right. The access versus ownership issue.
Hugely complex. And it means we love people. We love people like Cynthia because this is not easy stuff. And I think the general public and the general faculty audience really don't understand. They think electronic is simple and easy. You just send the check and it all happens. But what you've heard today is different things about, and we changed our library system and suddenly our library system wasn't working properly with our databases, or the databases weren't talking properly, so students couldn't access things without signing in 26,000 times.
Oh, yes.
So that's great. If there are no more questions, let's all thank Cynthia for her time. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. And as I said, I will send you the YouTube link just as soon as that processes. Quick plug too, always remember that if you all have any questions, any follow-ups, or need any help with research or anything else, you can contact me. I'm ckane1@emporia.edu. I'm always happy to set up one of these one of these Zoom sessions as well as an online research appointment at any time. So don't hesitate to do that.
And thank you. Cynthia's a good gal. She's wonderful.
Well, thank you.
Well, but the other thing is, even once you're graduated, do not think that you're losing contact with all of us. So if you have a question, somebody like Cynthia is an excellent person to say, I just graduated. Here I am in my academic position as new librarian, and I'm being asked to do this thing. Is this reasonable? I would need some help here. And very often an external person is a wonderful resource for you because they're not in your library. They can give you an answer that isn't clouded by, we understand so-and-so has a title but doesn't know a thing about copyright, or what, you know, this, that, or the other. So, and Cynthia, I hope I'm not overstating, but we've always found our library faculty extremely supportive, not just of our students while they're here, but if you need a professional opinion, and this goes for librarians, we're genuinely helpful people. So professional opinions are available not just for research for school, but even once you're gone, if you have a professional question, there is a wonderful resource for you who is experienced and willing. So thank you again, Cynthia. This was excellent.
I'm so glad to hear that. You all have a wonderful rest of the afternoon with your class, and take care.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. I can't see how to